This is chapter 10, and it's probably one of the most interesting chapters we have, and one of the most concrete. It's talking about project evaluation and how to determine if a project is going to meet the required rate of return. And you would think that's common sense. You should be able to figure that relatively easy. As we go through this, you're going to see there's a lot of room for play and a lot of questions that need to be asked. So we're going to first of all talk about the difficulty in finding a profitable project, and the really importance in finding one. I mean, taking the time to find one and not just take the first project that we come across. And then the next thing we'll look at is how to determine should it be accepted or rejected. And we're going to look at 5 ways. One is the payback period, one is the net present value and the profitability index, and then we'll look at the internal rate of return, and I've added one that's in the book but not specifically targeted through some of our exercises, is the modified internal rate of return. And then we'll look at how to select a project when the dollar is limited, when there's only so much money that can be used for capital outlay. Finally, we look at problems encountered when you look at that project ranking, and that's why we have so many of these. There's several disadvantages and advantages to each of these. And finally, we'll look at some ethical considerations, and that's always important. So that's kind of what we're headed for. First of all, we need to distinguish or define capital budgeting, and it's the process of decision-making for investments in fixed assets. Should the proposed project be accepted or rejected? Should I buy that new machine? Will it pay out in the long run? Will there be a return? Or would I be better putting my money someplace else? And one of the things that the book brings out, it's easier to evaluate them than it is to find them. So where do you find them? You find them within the firm. You have an R&D department. There might be ways to improve existing products or finding new projects that play off of the existing projects. Other sources would be, employees have great ideas, competition. Where's the competition headed? Maybe you have a supplier that says, I have this great widget. Can you figure out what we should do with this widget? And then you have customers that are also going to suggest projects that may be profitable for the company. So once you do find a project, then you have this decision, well, is it going to pay off? So you have several ways of determining that. The easiest one is probably the payback, that's a very easy, straightforward, very quickly. It has advantages, disadvantages. You have net present value, and that's going to involve time value of money. The profitability index kind of ties right in with the net present value. So these two will return fairly well the same positive or negative results. And then you have the internal rate of return and the modified internal rate of return. The internal rate of return does have some inherent flaws in it. The modified internal rate of return smooths out some of that. So we're going to look at each one of these. We are going to do net present value as an activity. So that's where we're headed, but we need a little bit of background first. So why do we need those? Well, we've got to do some rationing when we look at our capital. We only have so much money, and we want to take the money that we have and invest it wisely so that we get a good return on that investment for the stockholders. And we may have to be, and we always have to be really seriously cognizant of adverse conditions in the market. Sometimes this constraint of dollar size or the amount that we have for the capital budget may also be contingent on a shortage of qualified personnel. And we may have to take on debt to do a project, and the company or the officers or even the stockholders may not be willing to do that. So that kind of constrains how much money we have to put in that capital budget, which is also a good thing in a way because then we're very cautious with what project we do. So how do you select it? You could select one with the highest net present value, or you could rank them by profitability index or internal rate of return or by the payback period. Either way, however you do that, you're going to end up with a group of projects. This one's rated by IRR, that at some point is going to be a cutoff point, that this is all we can do right here. These may be good projects, but they don't meet the required rate of return, or this is the limit to how much money we have. We can look at these three. This one doesn't look like it would make it. It might, just depending on other factors in here. So that's one way of ranking it with the IRR. Here we're looking at the net present value ranking, and this one's actually using the profitability index, but you'll see there's some discrepancies over here. Your net present value is a little bit higher, so you could use this to rank them. But those all have some issues with them, and there are also other things that we have to look at. There's a size disparity, there's a time disparity, and there's an unequal life. So all projects are not created equal, is what this is saying. So let's look at the size disparity. This occurs when they're unequal size. An example. You have a cash flow for project A and B, and the required rate of return is 10. The initial outlay for A is $200, right? And the inflows are going to be $300 for, it doesn't tell us how long. The other one is $1,500 outlay, and the inflow is going to be $1,900. Well, wow, quite a bit different. Just looking at the numbers, which one would you say? Well, you kind of look at the bigger numbers and you get swayed, correct? So if you do an NPV, you do a profitability index, and you do an IRR on both of these, you'll see as you look at this, wow, okay, so NPV, this is winning here. The profitability is 1.3. Okay, this is a little bit higher. So as you look at it, this is what you kind of come up with, Using NPV, project B is better, right? Using PI and IRR, the project A is better. So what would you do in this situation? And that's when you come down to conventional wisdom. This is, which technique would you use? Well, you would use NPV whenever there's a size disparity. If there is no capital rationing, the project with the largest NPV will be selected. If there is capital rationing, you'll select a set of projects with the largest NPV. So if you're just looking at an individual project, two of them together. But if you have rationing, then you would pull out. So NPV in the case of size disparity. When you have a time disparity, which is well, let me show you. I guess an example would be better than me showing you. Okay, we have two projects, right? $1,000 outlay, but we get the money at different times. You'll notice this has an even distribution. This has a relatively small distribution at the beginning of the project and a larger one in the third year. So how would you gauge that? That's very difficult to do. So if you go to the table, and again, you will see here's some conflicting information here. Not conflicting, but confusing. So our MPV is high in Project A. Our PI is fairly good. I guess you could compare those. But look at the IRR. It's much higher. So what do you do in this situation? So which technique do you use? In most cases, they're going to say use the MPV. And you'll see why. The IRR has quite a few, not quite a few, it has really one major disadvantage that they try to eliminate by using the MIR, the modified. So again, it looks like the MPV would win out on this one. So here we have unequal lives, okay, and we use something called an EAA, which is an equivalent annual annuity, to draw those together, and it's a very quick calculation. You're going to get the net present value for both of these. This one is a 6-year and this is a 3-year. Now you'll notice the 3 years paying more, right? Initially up front for the first 3 years, and this one's distributing it more evenly throughout 6 years at a lower return. So as you look at this, you're going to get the net present value of both, and then you're going to divide that by the annual annuity factor. And you'll see A has a higher EAA, which would mean that would be the project to select. So when you have projects with two differing lengths of time, you would use the EAA to bring that into line. Now, an interesting fact, and this is something to really think about, they did a survey of several CEOs and CFOs and asked which was their primary method that they used to decide on capital expenditures or capital budgets. And the majority used IRR, which will cause you to pause when we go through the calculation of IRR and the advantages and disadvantages. The MPV was second. The payback was third, and the profitability index was 15%. And I believe that's probably more than likely because the MPV and the PI both return the same results. You know, if this is positive on the MPV, it's going to be positive here. And so they'll take the MPV because it brings back to present value. You have to do that before you get to here anyway. So that's kind of where we're going with this. We're going to step into next. We're going to do, going to go through the payback, and then I'm going to go through the MPV, how to do it. We'll look at the IRR and the MIRR. And we'll look at this right after the MPV. And we'll just kind of go through how to do each one of these. This is the overview. It's a good start, okay? This is a good chapter. It's very interesting. Thank you for listening.